the studio to take your calls, Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Cressida. Good to see you. Thank you for coming in. As we come to the end of this year, you will know just as keenly as the officers who you work with and serve under you. Currently, and I appreciate it's always a fluid situation, but we have a figure of 127 murders or homicides in this city, many of which it would appear could have been victims of some form of gangland violence. And there was an initiative that seemed to come out last week. You might have slightly tempered with subsequent comments about armed patrols in certain parts of London. Commissioner, can you elaborate on what you and your colleagues are seeking to do there? And good morning to you.
Good morning, Nick. Yes, well, we have armed patrols all the time, as you know, in our armed response vehicles. People know them, see them. We also have static officers standing there with firearms. We saw how fantastic and absolutely invaluable they are in the terrorist attacks last year, and every day they are out trying to suppress gun crime, deal with people who are armed with knives and guns, and keep our streets safe. When we have really significant incidents in a particular area, I'm thinking, for example, in the Lambeth-Southwark border, a few months ago we had a moment where there were 3 shootings at people's front doors and cars. Nobody injured, thank goodness, but also a murder within a space of about maybe 400 or 500 metres and a period of about 6 hours. Of course, we have then armed response officers in their cars in that area trying to find the suspects and trying to reassure the public. The suggestion, but we have not made any decision at all, is not only that we might do that, not only that when my unarmed officers are doing stop search, they might be supported by armed officers standing there, but also that the armed officers might take a short targeted deployment on foot. We haven't made a decision about that. We have a history in the Met of, since 1829, working with the consent of our public and doing things that they feel comfortable with. So we're consulting on that. It would be a small change in tactic in many respects, but it might have a big community impact. So what we need to know is, will this be basically reassuring, or will it have an effective deterrent effect, or is it something that would really concern people?
And what will inform your decision?
So we're talking to lots of people as we speak. We're talking to. We started off with our sort of closest advisors, who spend their whole time looking at our tactics. We make a change in tactics every time we do an operation. We'll change and learn and move on. And so we talk to a group of about 20 people who are really familiar with how police firearms works, and we've been talking to them. We'll be talking
What's against it?
To the mayor. I think some people are really concerned at what they see or hear as a slip towards more routine armed patrols, with firearms out. Now, I know you have a view on this. Other people have other views on it. But people, we are not an armed force.
No,
we
I
have
appreciate that.
a relatively small percentage of our officers are armed, and clearly the vast majority of the public are very supportive of the fact that we don't walk around with firearms all the time.
Yeah, just lastly,
so some people would be concerned about it, I suspect.
Lastly, many of my listeners feel confident if they go through an airport, or this time they go into shopping malls, and there are men and women brave enough to carry guns. They get great comfort from that, Commissioner.
Yeah, and I think that has changed over the last several years. Sadly, because of the terrorist threat, we have had to have armed officers in airports, at the tube stations on occasions, in the government security zone, as we call it. People will see them on the South Bank by the London Eye. Anywhere where we think there might be a crowded place and a terrorist threat, we on occasion have armed patrols, and people are more used to them. You see children coming up and having a chat to the firearms officers.
Yes.
Children up from a village in the southwest.
All right,
and they're friendly and normal people.
The first call is actually about this, Commissioner, so let's get ready. Let's bring in Richard in Chiswick, and you're through to the Commissioner. Go ahead, Richard. Morning to you.
Yeah, good morning. If the Mayor and your good self are that concerned about stop and search powers, how do you believe that arming these police, you're not going to add patrols? You've reduced stop and search by 25%, and violent crime has risen. Are you talking about putting more police on the street that are armed, or is this just another trendy political statement, a soundbite to appease what you're actually not doing?
I think the Commissioner might challenge some of your figures, actually, initially.
So, yes, I would. I mean,
Stop and search down
I'm not going to
25%?
speak for the mayor, but what I can say is that since I've become commissioner, stop and search has gone up. I have been very clear from day one that it is something I support. I expect my officers to do it. I expect them to be confident in doing it, and I'm supporting them doing it. In the last year, weapons searches are up nearly 30% through stop and search. We've done over 100 what we call Section 60 authorities, whereas a couple of years ago...
What is a Section 60?
So Section 60 is where we either fear that serious violence may occur, or there just has been and it's likely there's a tit for tat, for example, then we can put in place in a short space of time in a restricted area an authority which allows stopping and searching without reasonable grounds. That's the key thing. We've done that over 100 times this year. I think 2 years ago we probably did it 20 times or maybe only 15 times. So we are increasing stop and search. I am a big supporter of the power. I want my officers to be doing it, and I expect it to continue to increase in the coming
And to Richard's central
months.
point, what will these men and women who go on these limited patrols, what would they actually do? That's his central point.
So I don't suggest for 1 second that this, if it were to be enacted, would make a massive difference to the volumes of, for example, people stopped and searched. However, in very, very limited circumstances, in the kind of thing I've just described, Richard, I don't know if you heard me say it, it might be that actually the public in that area would expect to see firearms officers. They would feel reassured by firearms officers, perhaps, and it might deter further people coming by armed with guns or knives. But I think that would be in very limited circumstances. But what I can assure you, Richard, is that I am making sure not just the Violent Crime Task Force, which many people have heard of, but the whole of the Met are focused on dealing with violent crime, and I'm encouraging all my officers to do stop and search and a variety of other tactics.
Quick response from you, Richard.
I don't need reassurance. What I need is the truth. And what people are concerned about is the mayor comes out and says it's going to take 10 years to tackle this. You've got 900 officers that are sat around computers, which people, rather than seeing armed police on the streets, they'd rather see more police on the streets protecting them. They'd rather see more of them in communities. Trendy sound bites about something that you said yourself will make small or little impact on people is just another political statement which isn't tackling the immediate problem now. And if it's going to take 10 years to sort it out, the mayor should go, and you should go with him.
So I am putting more officers on the streets.
Do you agree when the mayor says that it's going to take 10? This was on the 5th of November. He said it would take a generation to turn the tide of violent crime. Is he right?
I think we are beginning to see the tide turning.
What makes you say that?
In that we are, as I've said, putting more officers on the streets. We are doing more stop and search. We're seizing more knives. We're seizing more firearms. We're seizing more offensive weapons. We're arresting more people for knife and gun crime. And we are beginning to see, after 3 years of knife crime increasing, gun crime increasing, they're now not just levelling off, but beginning to come down. I think that is through greater enforcement, fantastic work by my officers.
So it will take less than 10 years.
And that will begin to suppress and turn the tide. But nobody would suggest for 1 second that
but you
the
said earlier this year it
alone,
had plateaued, Commissioner.
Yeah, and I'm now saying it's beginning to come down. In terms of knife crime under 25, for example, where people are injured and they're under 25 years old, there is a definite downturn. However, I am sickened by each of those homicides, and I want to see them come down as well.
There have been more stabbings this year than before.
Knife crime under 25 is beginning to come down. Knife crime itself is stabilising and beginning to come down. Gun crime is beginning to stabilise and come down. These aren't huge changes. I think, however, we are suppressing it. But the mayor must be right that the police alone cannot do this, of course. And that to
so is it less than 10 years?
To stop 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds being dragged into criminal gangs and becoming gangsters themselves is a big, big project. And it may take a long time to really, really, really
10 years.
stop. I mean, we've got about 180 gangs in London. You know that. They're quite entrenched, many of them, and they are busy bringing children in. So you have to take a long-term approach. If you look at any of the countries where they have really brought violent crime down, like Scotland, they've taken a long-term approach. I'm not going to put... I am saying we are suppressing it, and I think it's going now in the right direction. It won't get to zero in my lifetime, Nick, and I guess we all know that.
Chris in Barnet on a related subject. Richard, thank you for your call. Chris, you're on the radio. Go ahead with the Commissioner. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Morning, Chris.
Good morning. If judges don't give adequate sentences for knife cases, then what can the Met do about it?
I think you're referring to the case of Joshua Gardner, who was handed a suspended sentence because the judge said he'd been kidnapped weeks before. He was caught on video trying to smash into a car with a large zombie knife in Croydon after he was tipped off his bicycle. The driver of the car fortunately ran away. There was considerable surprise that he was only given, a suspended term. Commissioner.
So in particular cases, if we and the prosecution are concerned about the length of the sentence, then we can refer that matter to the Attorney General. And I understand, actually, in that particular case we have. I'm not here to say...
You've appealed?
We have.
Oh, so have I. I've written a letter as well.
Referred, have you?
Yes, I have. 2 years suspended for that, running around with a zombie knife.
I'm not here to second-guess a judge. They have a difficult job to do. They have all the facts in front of them when they make their decisions, and they work within a framework. What I can say more broadly, though, is that we're working with the Ministry of Justice and the Home Secretary and others to try to ensure that people are fearful of the criminal justice system, that young people do think they're going to get a meaningful sentence, that young victims of crime know that someone else is going to get a meaningful sentence. But this man had
previous, and he's running around with a zombie knife, and he doesn't go down. Commissioner, how did you react as a copper?
I've told you we have referred it.
It was shocking, isn't it?
We've appealed it. You're not going to drag me into a headline against a judge.
All right, okay.
But the truth is, young people in particular do need to recognise that they are likely to get arrested, and back to Richard, your first caller, they are more and more likely to get arrested. They're more and more likely to have their weapons, and yes, that the sentence will match the crime. Not necessarily in this one, but I know I'm not going to get a word out of you. Chris, thank you. Guy in Stoke-on-Trent, going out of London. Guy, your call. Good morning.
Yeah, hi Nick, hi Commissioner. Reservations with the new tactic reference moped theft. Particularly, have you considered the risk of injury to the thief, to the culprit, and have you considered the cost? Once we've knocked someone off the bicycle, that person's going to need medical treatment.
Well, it's not normally a bicycle, as I understand it, it's a moped or a motorbike. Commissioner?
So Nick, when I became Commissioner, I was really shocked to see the level of moped thefts and crimes being committed on mopeds. In some parts of London in particular, we had thousands and thousands and exponentially increasing numbers of people, sometimes violent robberies, more often snatches of phones and other items by people on mopeds who were, if you like, behaving in quite an anarchic fashion. Thinking that they were not going to get caught. They could put, metaphorically, two fingers up at the police and everybody else. They were making a lot of money. They were young boys having a lot of fun. And it was shocking. Well, by a whole range of tactics, and this is just one, we have reduced the numbers of those crimes enormously. 50% down in the last year. We've had 7,000 less victims of theft by mopeds, 3,000 less victims of having their mopeds stolen. Right. That's very significant. In terms of that particular tactic, and as I say, it's just one of a whole series. We've improved our intelligence, we've improved our enforcement in all kinds of ways, we've improved prevention. We do pursue people. We've always pursued people. We have very, very highly trained officers who pursue people.
How are they trained?
They have a basic driving course. They then drive around London on their blue lights and whatnot for years. They then do an advanced driving course, and they that's another 4 weeks. So they've done 7 weeks of driver training at that stage. They spend years driving around as that. Some of them will be motorcycle drivers as well. And then they have a week-long special course on pursuits and how to bring a pursuit to a safe conclusion, which may include contact. What they have to do is to assess all the risks, the risk to the individual themselves, the risk to the public. Let's forget, these are people on stolen mopeds. These are people who often, not always, but usually have a knife. These are people who've committed a violent crime. These are people who are being pursued by a police car, sometimes for miles and miles, and utterly clear that the police car wants them to stop, and they are refusing to stop. In a very limited. What support do the officers get
who do the tactical contact?
So they are.
One's under investigation, isn't he or
there
she?
Are about every year this last year we've done about 650 pursuits of mopeds.
Yes.
Then about 60 have resulted in a tactical contact.
63.
Thank you.
I've got the figure.
About 60, and of those, a very, very, very small number have resulted in either the person being injured and or a complaint being made about the officer.
But hold on.
Officers are also frequently commended by judges in this. So your point, sorry, Nick on the phone, We do.
No, it's Guy on the phone,
Guy on
Commissioner.
the phone.
Guy
Sorry,
Nick
I'm
in
so
the studio.
sorry. I wrote
That's
down the
right.
wrong
Don't
name.
worry,
Guy, we do assess the risk. That's exactly what the officers do. They ask themselves, and they have a person in the control room as well, is this safe to do? Secondly,
so why is this officer being investigated in Erith?
Because if somebody complains about it,
Well, he's under
there
criminal
will be an
she is under
investigation.
criminal investigation.
I think the IOPC have taken this as an investigation. They have looked at the facts. I can't second guess those facts. They've decided that there is, in this particular instance, it isn't.
What confidence can I have, Commissioner? If I'm an officer serving under you, what confidence can I have if I do a tactical contact and the young man or woman says that it's something, and I'm now under investigation? Why should I do it?
Well, I go out with them a lot. They like doing the work. They do it brilliantly well. It's very,
this man or woman is under investigation.
It's extraordinarily rare. Whenever a police officer uses force, it must be justifiable. It must be within the law. It's in the nature of policing that we take risks, and on occasion, you know, today's hero is tomorrow's villain. You know that very well, Nick. It can be a really, really tricky job from that point of view. I try to protect them as much as I possibly can and make sure that the public realise that they are doing this in the best interest of the public.
So is Diane Abbott right with her reservations about this? She has reservations about this tactic.
I think Miss Abbott said that it, as guided, you know, it should be risk assessed. Well, I can tell you, these officers are brilliant at assessing the risks. They get commended by judges for bringing pursuits. Or
presumably this man or woman might get charged.
It depends what happened in the case, of course.
All right, Guy, thank you. John in Billericay, you're on the radio. John, go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, Sir Nick. Commissioner, why are custody officers allowed to protect themselves against the vile individuals who want to spit in their faces by having access to spit hoods, but frontline patrol officers aren't?
This is the conversation you and I had in the past about spit guards, spit hoods, which are being used by some police forces, interestingly enough, the British Transport Police, but currently not by the Met. But I think there's a trial going on. Commissioner.
So we have had them in our custody suites for just over a year. As you say, we could have had them for about the last 12 years. I brought them in there. They're working very well. They are used under supervision in controlled circumstances. And when somebody has already bitten or spat, they are an excellent tool, well supervised. In some other police forces, as you say, they do use them. My officers clearly, I think the majority, want to use them. I have been concerned, and you've probably heard me say this before, I have been concerned that actually the use of them will be in very limited circumstances, clearly, because you've got to know that the person is going to spit. So it won't actually protect the officers in most of the cases when they are spat at. Being spat at is vile. It is a crime. It should be dealt with. It shouldn't happen. Unfortunately, it does, mostly spontaneously. If somebody has spat, I can understand why officers then want protection, and I am currently looking at what is the best way to protect them from that. I'm
so
working with the Federation. Absolutely, I'm looking at it with the Federation.
Last time we met.
I'm looking at it with the Federation. I have been concerned, as you know, Nick, that A, they might put themselves at risk of exactly the sort of investigation you have talked about, because as soon as you put the spit guard on, you have to have extra supervision, you have to make sure the person is still breathing. There's all yes, because there's always several officers around and it's on CCTV and goodness knows what else.
But your men and women are carrying cameras now.
Yeah, but there's you as soon as you put the spit guard on, you have to keep checking the person's breathing. You have to have 2 or 3 officers there. You have
How do BTP manage?
Well, there have been cases, sadly, where people have even died, where an allegation has been made that the spit guard contributed to it, and the officers have been investigated for years.
What will make your decision? How will you
finally
decide?
I have felt that it might make them more unsafe, not safe, and that has been the advice I've been given on the streets of London.
So what will make you and your colleagues decide yes or no for spit guards?
Well, it may not be spit guards. I'm looking at all sorts of different ways in which we might be able to. I'm looking at a whole different set of all
just give me
sorts
one
of
other
possibilities.
Thing. What else could there be?
Well, for example, in the in accident and emergency, they don't put spit guards on the angry, usually drug-induced disturbed person. They protect themselves. There may be other options.
So the officer dons something.
Possibly. We're looking at different technologies, different ways of doing this.
All right, John, thank you for that. Thomas in Glasgow. Thomas, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
I'm a retired police officer, and recently there was an incident where an assistant commissioner was nearby to an incident where one of his colleagues was being attacked, subsequently leading to his death. The assistant commissioner, rather than help the stranded officer drove off. Police officer's first duty is the protection of life. Over and above that, his first duty is to protect his fellow officers. There's nothing more important than assisting a fellow officer who's needing assistance urgently. The Assistant Commissioner, I believe, is standing down. Should he be subject to disciplinary proceedings for neglect of duty prior to standing down rather than be just allowed to stand down?
Just to correct, it's acting. So he wasn't assistant. My understanding is acting Commissioner Sir Craig Mackey. Commissioner.
Absolutely not. I suggest you read the coroner's comments on this. It's very clear. Craig Mackey could not have prevented, sadly, Keith Palmer being killed, nor would it have been helpful if he had got involved at that stage. I really do suggest you read the coroner's comments on this. Very, very definitive.
Summarise them then. What will Thomas learn from reading the coroner's comments?
Firstly, that Craig had no opportunity to save Keith's life.
Right.
Secondly, that after Keith had been brutally attacked twice, given that Craig was the acting commissioner, and most right-minded people would have thought that we were under a potentially series of terrorist attacks
in
London.
An armed guard with him?
I'm not going to get into that, Nick. I'm not going to get into that. What's that got to do with the question?
Well, if he'd had an armed guard in his, I assume, Range Rover, which you guys are normally in, the armed guard would have possibly been able to take some kind of action. With whom was he travelling? I don't mean the names, but were they with officers?
He was travelling at the time with two members of what we call police staff. So he was the police officer in the car. But
who were the other two people then? They weren't police?
No, they were police staff. They're members of our organisation.
Not officers?
No. But I go back to it.
He had no... travelling without a police officer?
We make decisions on that kind of thing on a daily basis, all the time. Who are you going to have with you, for what purposes? It depends with the threat level and what about the individual and that kind of thing. On that occasion, he was within the bounds of Parliament. He had two members of police staff with him.
Right.
That's all he had. He was the police officer in the car. He had no opportunity to save Keith's life.
It's
perfectly plausible.
It's
perfectly plausible that if he had got out of the car, he might have got in the way of the fantastic firearms officers who actually shot Masood. He certainly wouldn't have been able to save Keith's life. And in my view, and I've made it very clear, I think a lot of the comments about this are ill-informed. And
you also said ignorant.
Well, I do think I suppose it's in the nature of the Twitter sphere. I think many people made some very, very, very ignorant and utterly unfair comments. If you go back to what the coroner subsequently said on the last day of the inquest, I believe that Craig Mackey did the right thing. Now, not everybody is going to agree with me. I understand that, but I am a professional police officer.
You have a protection officer with you all the time.
I have a protection officer with me. I have a protection officer with me.
But why didn't he?
Because the threat and the risk at that point was different.
But that was a calamitous decision not to give him a protection officer, isn't it?
I was not in the Met at the time. I'm not going to second-guess that decision, but I don't think it would have made any difference to his actions. Secondly, as I've said, he had no opportunity to save Keith. If he had got out of the car, he wouldn't have been doing his job, which was to make sure that the whole of London was safe and to get on and do that. There were many people who were available. He would have almost certainly, in a sense, got in the way, possibly literally, of the firearms officers taking the shot.
OK, Thomas, thank you for your question. Let's do a couple of questions that are coming in from the emails, texts and tweets. Rachel in Bexley, what does the Commissioner think of people videoing officers as they're being attacked?
I think it's absolutely awful. Police officers have, sadly, on occasion been assaulted throughout history. What we seem to be seeing now is not only police officers being assaulted, but sometimes crowds gathering, which is not an entirely new phenomenon either. I remember it when I was, a PC, when I was an inspector in South London. But a crowd gathering and then some people filming, laughing, joking. Other people, we've seen 2 or 3 videos where people have intervened to try and drag the officers away from the person they are needing to arrest. Officers getting assaulted and people thinking that's funny. Putting it on the internet, I think, is disgusting.
Should people pitch in?
I think I want to live in a society, and I think I do live in a society, where we have active citizens, where people stand up and say, that's not right, don't do that, or on occasion, even if they feel able, get involved and do something physical.
You'd urge them, if they feel able.
Exactly. You have to look at the circumstances. If there's a man pointing a gun at you, we don't want you running at the man pointing the gun. that would be crazy.
If you see an officer getting a kicking?
If you see an officer getting a kicking and you feel able to assist, absolutely, I want my public getting involved. And we see people getting involved, including on some of those videos. People do. I commend them. I bring them in for a cup of tea. I give them medals for it. I think it's great. We don't want people taking crazy risks. We do want people getting involved.
All right. I know you're keen to talk about recruitment. There is a suggestion that the suggestion in one of the front pages of the newspapers today that police numbers are falling, and Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, says police officer numbers in London could drop to their lowest level since 2002. What do you have as the current number of police officers serving under you, Commissioner?
We have about 29,700 and something.
Yes, well done. Yes, absolutely right. The fear is it could drop to 26,800, says Mayor Khan. You want to talk recruitment, Commissioner?
I think what the Mayor is talking about is that one of the challenges we have in policing is not only that latterly we've had a reduction, as you know, that's about 2,500 less than our peak level, but also we're never certain from one year to the next because of the way the funding settlements work. So there is a risk that we will go down again in the future if things don't change. But right now we are recruiting and we want to get up to well into the sort of 30,000. I think I said 700 last time. That's what we're aiming for. We're recruiting like mad. We're getting good candidates coming in. I speak to all Londoners and beyond because I've lifted the residency requirement. If you think you might want to become a police officer, get in touch. This month we've had 270 new officers join us. Next month we are having around about 350 will turn up at the recruit training. So that's good, but we need to keep that up over the coming months. And I'm looking forward to welcoming many more people, probably a couple of thousand in the next year into the Met.
Last couple of questions. You may recall last time we met, I handed you a dossier concerning anti-Semitism. It's 3 months since I actually gave you that dossier. Have charges been brought, and if not, why not? Or is there nothing to it?
No charges have been brought. We've been working carefully through the documents that you gave us. Quite a large volume of material involving a number of different people. These are reasonably complex crimes to investigate, actually. We're taking early advice now from the CPS in relation to a small number of the named people where we believe that a crime may be made out. It's for the CPS to give us advice as to whether, first of all, the evidential standard has been met, and then secondly, whether it is likely to be in the public interest for any charge to be brought. So quite complicated. We need to talk to the CPS. If they come back to us and say, yep, we think you're right, we will carry on with our investigation into a small number of people for anti-Semitic crimes. I don't actually have the number at my fingertips, okay. But it is, not everybody that you name. It's a large handful, yeah, okay. But it's not everybody that you named in the documents.
Lynn Owens, who you'll know is the head of the National Crime Agency, has told a Commons Home Affairs Committee should be deeply concerned about security implications if Britain leaves Europe in a no deal. Are you working on that scenario?
We're trying to work on all scenarios. We're trying to prepare contingencies for all scenarios. It's a very uncertain time.
But what is the policing aspect of it?
Well, there are a number of things. The first thing is that in a no-deal scenario, we, as Lynn indicated, would lose access pretty much overnight to a number of intelligence databases and ways of working with our European partners, such as the European Arrest Warrant. And they would be quite difficult and quite slow to replace. In fact, some of them are impossible to replace, almost certainly in in the future. But there are, and then secondly, in a no-deal scenario, and I've commented on this before, there are suggestions that obviously there might be issues at the ports and various other things. So we, the police, are looking to see how we can assist, how we can prepare. There might be protests.
Well, I was going to say, is there an aspect of civil unrest of some sort?
There's certainly a potential for protest. We're in London. It's the protest capital of the world. We spend our life.
Paris might have a view on that at the moment.
Dear me, yes, that appalling situation there. Yeah. So we are preparing for all scenarios, Nick. And deal, no deal, the police will be here, and we will do our level best to keep everybody safe.
Lastly, I know you have to go, but let's lift the mood. Last time I saw you on TV was part of the celebration of 100 years of women in the Met. I know you feel, obviously, you're very keen because you're the first female commissioner. Why is it important to continue to encourage women to join up?
So it is a fantastic moment. I'm wearing my badge.
I was trying to see what. I didn't want to look too closely. What is that badge on your chest?
This is my 100 years of Women in the Met badge. So they went out on patrol.
I didn't want to look too closely. It wasn't appropriate.
For the first time in May 2019 will actually be the 100 years of when they went out on patrol. But they were given their orders last week. And so, yes, we've started our celebrations. We want to really highlight what women have contributed over the years. Some really brave pioneers, some amazing things they've done. But we want to say, as part of our recruitment campaign, we are a fantastic job for women to do. We have women flooding into the Met, flooding into detectives, for example. When you and I probably first met, there might have been one woman in the CID office. It was not seen as a job for women. You think of, the Sweeney and whatnot. Now,
yes.
Between 30 and 40% of my detectives are female. Women are contributing at every level, every rank except Deputy Commissioner, doing every kind of job, thriving. And I just think that perhaps the image in the public is still a little bit more male.
We need a Deputy Commissioner as a woman, don't there? Must be someone on the way.
We've just got a new one, and I can assure you it's not a woman. And we just want to say we are flexible. We are a really great place for women to work. We are looking again at our policies to see if there are things we can change even more to make it, I would like, long run, won't happen in my time, to aim for a 50-50 force. Of course I would.
All right. Thank you very much for coming. Merry Christmas to you and, of course, all the officers who serve under you and the work they do looking after all the Londoners and others who are listening at this time.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Commissioner Cressida appearing here on LBC where news is next.
The Met Police Commissioner has told LBC we are beginning to see the tide turning against violent crime in London. Cressida says more